Welcome to Thriving in the Game, a podcast dedicated to exploring what Black women need to navigate the corporate world of technology, offering insights, strategies, and personal stories that will affirm, validate, and encourage you on your journey up the corporate ladder. I'm your host, Alicia. Join me as we learn how to thrive together. I'm so excited for you to be listening. This podcast has been a long time coming, and I couldn't wait to share this season with you. In this first episode, we're exploring the concept of belonging. As a Black woman in tech, have you ever had a moment of angst or frustration where you asked yourself, do I really belong here? We often look at belonging as whether or not we actually fit into an organization or on a team or in a role. But I'd like to offer that you look at it through a lens of empowerment. Black women, we know that we know that we know that we know. Corporate structures were not designed with us in mind. We've got the statistics and experiences to prove it. But the choice is yours. There is power in your presence. You earned your way here, you deserve to be here, and yes, you belong here if you want to be. Coming up, you'll hear a conversation between myself and Hiwote Getaneh. She's the founder of Depth and Candor podcasting agency and a producer behind shows like This Is Dating, How's Work, Where Should We Begin with Esther Perel, Together Apart with Priya Parker, and most recently, The Possibility Pattern. Hiwote has an inspiring and engaging story of how she began her career in tech, found her empowered voice, and ultimately made a decision that would change the course of her entire career. As you listen to her story, I hope that you find the connection and encouragement you need to reflect on your own. Hiwote, welcome. Happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to see this podcast come to life.
Thank you. Well, again, happy to have you. Thank you for taking time to be with us today. If you could, tell us about your early journey into corporate.
Yeah, so I worked at a social policy research company for 3 years after grad school. And I was a statistical programmer, so I spent all day literally crunching numbers and data, which, if you know me, doesn't actually make sense for my personality. But I was there basically between the ages of 27 to 30-ish. Mm-hmm. And I found myself really frustrated because I was in there as an analyst, and the expectation was that I would be promoted to an associate within 2 years because that's the norm. Mm-hmm. And I was there for 3 years. And when I tell you getting promoted was the fight of my life, I basically had to threaten to leave in order to get promoted. And I think that was when I was like, you know what? This ain't for me.
Yeah. So for the focus of today's chat is really about early entry career women, Black women in corporate who are questioning whether or not they belong in this space. And what resonates is many of the young women that we are talking to are in that space, right? They've been in this job for a few years. They've been working towards promotion, sometimes experiencing the same thing, having to kill yourself or really just, like you said, threaten to leave before they're actually recognized. And so we know over time that can really start to impact you. Tell us a little bit, as you're comfortable, how did that resonate with you? Because if you came close to leaving, I mean, that I'm sure that kind of impacted you in some different ways.
I left, actually. And you know what? When I did leave, I remember, because the hierarchy at the company that I was at, promotions weren't necessarily based on what your boss or your boss's boss thought. It was at the highest level, they decided how many people would get promoted to what levels each quarter, maybe twice a year. Yeah. And so the woman that hired me was a Black woman. Her name was Electra. She was a genius. She had been there for over 30 years and basically had earned her respect because she was just exceptional at her job. And she did whatever the hell she wanted. So that was really cool for me to see coming into that world, because it just made me realize that I don't have to pretend to be like them in order to succeed.
Okay.
At the same time, she actually had a level, I really mean it when I say genius, she had a level of genius for this kind of work, for the numbers that I didn't have. So I was like, I don't have what she has, so I do need to play the politics game. And the problem with that was it was a research company, and a lot of the research was for Black and brown families. So they needed Black and or brown women who could actually be in the field, like recruiting research participants, etc. And so they kept trying to put me into that role of operations instead of analytics. And even though I didn't like the analytics that much, I really felt like I had to stay and fight for that position, because it felt like, on principle, you can't direct my career for me when I'm telling you the direction that I want to grow in. And so it was basically like 3 years of me fighting for something I wasn't even really sure that I wanted, just to prove a point.
Right.
And then when I eventually was like, you know what, I don't actually even want to do this. And when they did offer me the promotion, Electra called me and she was like, you know what, you and I haven't really talked about this, but I really appreciate the confidence that you displayed, because these people will literally grind you down if you let them. And I love that you said you're leaving. And it just goes to show you actually do have to threaten to leave at this place in order to get promoted. So that's a very specific culture, a very specific place. But like now in retrospect, it's very fascinating to me that even your leadership can't really tell you sometimes how to navigate things because they're struggling with the same thing. So you kind of have to get your playbook somewhere else.
Wow. I think there are a couple of things that I find really interesting about that. One, just the focus of the research and the fact that there were only 2 Black women in those statistical roles. So that alone is frustrating. And 2, you said that Electra had a level of genius that you didn't have. And so that strikes me as interesting. What made you feel like you didn't have a similar but maybe different genius?
Yes. I think I just didn't know it. And I thought at that time, like, I didn't know what my genius was. And I think at that time, I really valued my analytical brain and devalued my people skills, my like storytelling skills, the things that I was actually interested in. I thought that's not a real way to make a living. So I just completely discounted that, which is ironic because that's literally how I make a living now.
Right. You're amazing at it. So yes.
But I do think that numbers were not my genius. Like me sitting and running data and running statistics and formulas to actually come up with like statistical models, neither excited me nor energized me. You know, I felt like I was doing this because I wanted to be smart or be considered smart, not necessarily because that's what I should have been doing.
Wow. How did you parse that, right? Like you said, it didn't energize you. It wasn't interesting. And you felt it was almost like you were fulfilling a role that made you seem smart. Do you feel like that influence came from family or just from your own personal views of what you thought smart looked like at the time?
I think like I would have to go way further back. One is I'm an immigrant, and if you haven't heard this before, this is going to be the thing you'll now hear everywhere. But children of immigrants, we are told that there are a couple of real jobs. You either become a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or an engineer. Everything else is a joke. Okay. So like no other, like currently my career as a podcast producer, my mom still is like, so they pay you to do this. Like,
the shock. The shock.
Like, so really? I think,
yes, ma'am, they do.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think that's where it first started. It was like, I have to be someone in the world of STEM or in the world of numbers or a lawyer, right? Like someone with a role that is known and that is considered prestigious in order for me to be a successful adult.
Mm.
And to be honest, when I knew that I didn't want to go to med school because I hated biochem, which was my major, I was like, okay, what else do I want to do? I went to grad school to study public policy and health finance just to fill the quota of immigrant kid gets second degree. Like, it's not because I cared about public policy at that point in my life. I really was just trying, and it was super deep. Like, I thought it was my own desire at that point, even though internally there was a misalignment. Like, my intuition the first day when I sat down in my classroom for grad school, I went to Hopkins. I moved from New York to Hopkins for grad school. And I remember sitting down in that classroom and thinking, I'm not supposed to be here.
Wow. From
But from day one. But I had just moved. Like, I moved all of my stuff. So what was I going to do? I wasn't going to throw it all away and start over or move back. So I stayed for 2 years. And then I got a career in that path for 3 years. So I think a lot of it just is like building on itself, because you made a decision. Now you have to like stick to that decision, etc.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, those 2 years in grad school were my most miserable 2 years. Like, I was very, very, very depressed. The positive is that I think it is often in our hardest moments that we see the answers that'll help us. So that's when I started thinking about a creative outlet. So I was like, maybe I'll start a blog, maybe I'll start a podcast. And eventually I did start a podcast.
Wow. I have friends who are immigrant kids, they're first gen kids, and very similar journey, right? Like, you only have so many options. And I've seen many of them struggle. I even laugh because I think about Toby Wigwe. He's a rapper out of Houston. And same thing. Like, his mother just started to respect his rap career because now she's getting gifts, right? Like, it is a journey for immigrant kids.
Absolutely.
And what's crazy, I think, is my journey is somewhat similar. Like, I decided on my major at 14. My grandfather was an assistant provost at Tuskegee University. He was like, "You're going to be an engineer." And I was like, "No, we're not going to do that." But I knew, okay, I was going to go into business, and I was interested in advertising and marketing. And I still ended up in IT. And I don't regret it. I mean, I spent almost 20 years in IT, but very similarly trying to nurture that analytical brain, all the while moving from company to company. And it's just like, this really isn't me. But there's a success level, right? And it makes money.
And the money can be super, it's not just alluring, but it can be very confusing, because I remember at this job that we're talking about, when I graduated from grad school and I started social policy research work, I was making around 85 or 90K. And I really thought, if I leave and pursue something in the world of media, I'm not going to make this. Like, I'm not going to make it now, but when am I ever going to make this much money? Not because I thought it was so high, but I just didn't know what the path was. So like, what is the path to me actually making the 6 figures, the 200Ks in the future? It just felt really far away. And it's because you can't see the path, because it's not as clearly laid out, especially if you're going to go into a creative path. You are paving the way for yourself and defining how much you're worth getting paid almost on a daily basis. So the money piece played a really big role in why I stayed as long as I stayed, because I didn't want to go become an intern in the media world getting half the salary. And I was living in New York City. Exactly.
I understand that completely. I think for me, at this juncture of life, making this shift, that was a big part of it too. You're walking away from a salary and benefits. So, like you said, the road not being clear is definitely true. I think what strikes me is, what gave you the courage to make that shift anyway?
To go into the media world?
Yeah.
I was kind of pushed into it. So there's this very specific moment where I was 2.5 years in, and there was no sign of promotion. And every 6 months when the promotion cycle would happen, I didn't see my name even like mentioned. And when I would talk to my boss about it, she would be like, "Yeah, I put your name in, but I'm not sure. They said they're happy to grow you if you go into the operations roles, etc." I found myself really frustrated. So I scheduled a meeting with the director and I told my boss, okay, like I'm going to ask her what it is that I'm failing to do or what I need to do in order to keep growing. So I remember sitting in her very nice office overlooking Midtown Manhattan. She was very pregnant, sitting behind this huge mahogany table, and I was sitting in this like measly little chair. And I was like, "Hi." Her name was Joanna. I was like, "Hi, Joanna. I just wanted to figure out like what it was that I'm not doing, and I'm really trying." I was very meek with the whole thing, and she essentially was like, listen, if you want to stay in data, you're not going to grow. We have too many people in that vertical, and we need more people in operations. You're clearly good at it. Never obviously would bring in like the race piece or any of that. But she was like, you're clearly good at it, and that's where we need people. So if you're interested in transitioning over to that area, we can promote you. And I was like, but that's not my field. That's not what I want to do. I think it's important to have people who look like me working on the actual data. Like, you want my input on what kinds of variables matter, you know?
Right.
And she was like, I'm very sorry. There's nothing I can do. She was very cold in the conversation. And so I said, okay, so are you telling me that if I don't switch over, there's no opportunity for growth for me here? And she said, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I was like, okay, so to be clear, you're telling me it's okay for me to look for other jobs. Or I didn't say it's okay, but I said, like, to be clear, I will be looking for other jobs if that's the case. And she said, go ahead, go for it. And I went from like very meek in that moment to like this rage just like building up in my body. And it must have taken like the maximum of 2 weeks for me to get another job in the world of media. And I think this is also just like how God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, works, where you get the information you need and something gets lit up. And I just started telling all my friends, hey, I'm looking to transition into media. I know that I really enjoy podcasting. I don't know why I'm at this company that I'm not going to grow at. So like, let me get closer to it. I knew I couldn't just jump into producing because I didn't have enough experience, but I was kind of pushed into it because she put me in this position where I was like, there's no place for me here. So I actually do have to leave. So now there's energy around actually finding a job that I want to do and where I think I could grow.
I think there are a few thoughts that I have. So one, the nuggets that I take from that is one, like you said, with Electra, reiterating the fact that you displayed that level of confidence, right? Because you have many people who struggle with imposter syndrome and don't really have that confidence. They would have stayed or they would have allowed themselves to be moved into a field that they weren't really comfortable with. Outside of that moment, what do you think? Because initially you said you entered that conversation kind of meek.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's just like personality or what do you think just lit that fire to be like, you know what, I'm not going to allow you to push me into something that I don't want to be in? Because even your statement in that conversation was bold. Like, I love it. It was.
Yeah. And I think it's funny looking back because I was not bold, not bold, not bold, not bold. And then it was like, I was at a 0 and then I went to 100.
Right.
I do think it's personality, but I also want to see if there's a way that like folks who have a different personality, what the equivalent of that would be. But I have to say that this is actually a trend in my life where I am perceived as really nice. But I think because of that, and I actually feel like I want to be kind. I want to be like, that is who I want to be in the world. But when I feel anger is when I really feel my own power. When I feel like someone's disrespecting me is when I'm like,
taking advantage.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's the moment. Exactly. Where I'm like, no. You misunderstood.
Right.
You took my kindness for weakness. We're not playing that game. So I do think that is personality, but I mean, it must have been nurtured at some point in my life for that to keep happening over and over again. Because even after I left, there have been other jobs where I've been like, so I'm not being appreciated here. So that's why I'm going to go do my own thing. But I think for folks who are in that position, I think it is a remembering. This is also the pro to the immigrant thing, where we are instilled with a lot of pride. And I think a lot of my non-immigrant Black friends have a version of this, which is like, listen, I define the culture. You're not going to, like, I'm fitting into your world, but at a certain point, you're not going to tell me who I am. I'm going to tell you who I am. So I do think there's different sources of energy for people. I think for me, it's definitely the immigrant thing and a personality thing. But if I were to go back and talk to like the 27-year-old version of myself, I'd probably say, you don't have to go from 0 to 100. You can like actually let people know that you are not to be messed with earlier, so that it doesn't take 3 years before they're like, oh, she's actually going to leave. I could have threatened to leave at 2 years if I actually believed it myself, but it took me a while to do that.
In the midst of that conversation, what I also heard was you reframing, right? She made a statement and you were like, okay, so let me clarify. What you're saying to me is if I don't move here, then my career will not grow. And I think that's a really beautiful skill to have just for internal reasons. Sometimes we look at a situation and we allow it to just kind of play out, whether it be work, relationships, anything. Calling the thing what it is out loud to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, that in that moment gave you the clarity you needed. The other piece to take from that is represent your worth from the very beginning. Learn to appreciate yourself and your skills. Know who you are, value who you are from the very beginning, so that in the end you don't feel taken advantage of. Because I think I've been in that situation too, where I've been the nice Black girl. I'm not problematic. I'm not angry. I make myself smile so everybody feels comfortable. And then something happens and it's like, you played with my money or you played with my reputation. And now, see, now it's a different side of me. Not that I was ever rude or anything, but there is a shift.
And I really do admire the people who are good at showing those two sides early and consistently, almost like responding in real time as things are happening, as opposed to like waiting for disrespect number 1, disrespect number 2. You're assessing the situation and then it gets to 10 and you're like, oh yeah, I'm not playing this game anymore. And I don't even know if that's an incorrect way to play it out, but I think the more you know yourself, it becomes easier to, in real time, the first time someone disrespects you, for you to say, actually, I'd really like for you to clarify what you mean by that statement. I would have never said that in years 1 and 2 because I just assumed, I don't know, that everyone was like as nice as I was.
Or operating from an honest place. I take what you're saying at face value. Because I am, what you see is what you get. There's nothing hidden behind what I'm saying. So I've had that expectation of other people and had to learn throughout my career that is not politics in the corporate world, and that is not how the game is played. So you have to read between the lines. And there's something else you made me think of, because I am currently on sabbatical from the corporate world. And it took me a couple of years in talking with my therapist and kind of like, no, I can't really step away.
Same.
But I had this moment with a friend, probably November of what year are we in? 22. And she said, all right, Alicia, you've been gathering information. How many more signs do you need? And I went, because it had been about 10, 12 of them, right? Like there have been so many signs. And like you said, I think being able to do that early in your career to reframe, even if not in the conversation with that person, but to yourself, reframe, send a follow-up email, clarify, is this what's being said? And being able to make your decision the first time. Right? So if young Hiwote could have said let's even say the 1 year mark, I've been here a year, even at 6 months, I was submitted for promotion. What is happening? Right? I spoke with a lecturer. She submitted me.
Exactly.
Okay. But we needed another year and a half before it was like, wait a minute. Are you trying to play me? I feel like you're trying to play me.
You're exactly right. Yeah, it did take that long. And I wonder, because I think it's about, to your point about your friend saying, how many more signs do you need? Because I think it's totally natural and smart even that we would just spend some time collecting data. There are people who are the total opposite of that and actually don't collect data and instead make big decisions on a whim and then have to figure out how to get themselves out of those problems or successes that they weren't expecting, right? But the problem comes when you've been collecting data for too long.
Right.
And how to know whether you've been collecting it for too long is something we should discuss, because even when you say for you wanting to pursue a creative endeavor and someone had to like enter into your brain space to be like, hi, hello, we can't keep doing this. Like, you got to execute on this. Sometimes I do think it is just the gift that comes with being a person in community with other people. I think that that is a very big and important part of it, where if we don't have friends, family, mentors, colleagues that we can share our desires with, who can reflect back to us, this is not the path you want to go in. Or like, you've said this a few times, you should actually follow through on this thing. I think it's very hard for us to even recognize that we've been collecting data.
Yeah.
You know, until you get to a point of frustration. And you don't really want to make a decision from a place of frustration, because if you do, you want to do it calmly, because you don't want to make any erratic decisions. They can be emotionally triggered, but that emotion is not going to fuel you past a certain point in time. So you do need logic, you do need strategy. So allowing the emotion to exist, but then also integrating the left brain, integrating both sides so that you're not doing it from just one side or the other, I think is extremely important. And for me, it's always people. People are the triggers to remind me what I said I wanted, or to even be the signs. When I talk to people who want to start a podcast, they'll say, oh, I saw your email and I knew it was a sign. And it's not necessarily that it was a sign. It's that your brain was already attuned to this. You want this thing.
You were
so
open
you
to
will,
it.
you exactly, you were open to it. So you will find signs because this is what you want. So, yeah.
So did you, outside of that encounter with Joanna, may her and her child be blessed, did you have anyone else at the time? Because again, you're coming from your family, immigrant family. There's a certain work ethic that is expected. Did you have anyone else, any other mentors or friends who also were like, now that this has happened, you've been saying for a while you want to do X, Y, and Z?
So I had colleagues around me who agreed with me, and they felt the same way for themselves too. Like, wait, how long are we going to do this for? This is not a sustainable way to operate. Whether it was about getting promoted or how overworked some of us were, there were all of these different variables for different people where it was like, this is not actually good for us, or the way this is being run is not healthy. So I definitely had a community within the organization, my peers, people at my level, or maybe a level above me or a level right below me, where we discussed these things so I did not feel alone. And then I had friends outside the organization who I talked to a lot about my career. At that point, my career was probably the focal point of my life. I really just wanted to do something that was fulfilling to me. So I had a lot of emotions around work. I felt often like I'm tired, which even now as a podcast producer, like certain projects, which are really not the kinds of projects that I should be doing, I notice my energy level is very low. And at this point, I have a close enough relationship with my body where I can tell, like, that's a signal. This is not where I should be. Of course, if I have a project that's in front of me, I will finish it and I'll do it well. But this is not what I'm going to ask for the next time, So my friends noticed that I had a lot of drive, but also a lot of, I don't want to say sadness, but I had a lot of like frustration around my work, not just around getting promoted, but I was always fearful that I wasn't good enough or that I would never be the best programmer. And there was a lot of anxiety that always came up with it. So they always held space for that, allowed me to process that. I eventually started therapy. My therapist was one of the biggest factors in helping me let go. Like, she was like, how about maybe you don't need to be the best programmer? And I was like, what a concept.
It's like, I don't know. Did you talk to my mom about that? Because I don't think
I don't think I'm allowed to leave. Yeah.
I don't think that's true. I don't think I'm allowed to leave. No, I have to be the best.
Exactly. Exactly. But I will say the other thing that was very helpful was I'd started podcasting as a side hustle at that job.
Okay.
And it helped validate for me the minimum viability of this thing, right? Which is like, oh, there are people listening to this thing. There are other people who are as frustrated as me. Oh, there's this whole world of social media that I get to like learn and explore. I had all of this excitement is not the right word, but intrigue. I was very curious about this whole other world, and it still didn't feel like a career, but in talking to people about their careers, it was very clear that I was not doing the thing that was in alignment for me.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I think what I hear you saying is you have to display as much curiosity for yourself as you do the work. What I love about the shift in culture is that we're no longer saying, okay, you're going to be doing this for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
I think what's good about what you're saying is to check in with yourself.
Yes.
Whether it be quarterly or every 6 months, take stock of your emotions. How are you feeling? They talk about the Sunday scaries. And I know I had developed that in my last role. Like the anxiety is up. I don't want to go there tomorrow. Like,
don't take me to that place.
I want that check in 2 weeks, but I don't really want to be here. So I think for someone early in their career is despite, it's hard, right? You can't just say despite family, but despite family.
Yes. Part of what you're doing in this phase of your life is creating your actual identity as an adult in the world. Yes. So you do have to face that tension for some of us, not everyone, right? But for some people, there is that tension of going against what was expected for you and defining for yourself what the rest of your life is going to be like. So you're totally right. Despite family, you have to forge your own path.
I think you have to start in the beginning. Like you said, doing those check-ins, seeing how you feel. If the conversation around your work constantly is, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, then you really have to sit with yourself and figure that out before you get to a Joanna encounter or before you feel devalued, before you feel, I guess maybe even unworthy is something that I've heard people say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would also say back then I was running way too fast for me to do anything like really checking in with my body at that phase of my life. It felt like I have so much to do. But if there is any space that you already carve out, if you're already a journaler or somebody who spends a few minutes praying or meditating before you start your day, I really think actually checking in physically, like what sensations are in your body or what is your body constantly doing when you are at work or when you are coming back from work or when you try to go to bed. Paying attention to the signals your body is telling you, I think is actually the biggest game changer in the world and the fastest way to get to where you want to go. Because I used to say that I'm just a super anxious person. And I just thought that was like my personality. And it wasn't. I was just in the wrong place. So my body was like, get out. Yeah. This is not it. And one of the ways that anxiety would manifest was in really poor sleep. So I would wake up almost without a doubt every morning at 3 a.m. in this state of, especially towards the end, it was like, damn, I got to do this tomorrow. Like, I can't go back in there. Or trying to solve a problem so that my boss wouldn't be upset in the middle of the night. That's all really important information because that's telling me I've basically given up my relationship to my body over to this corporation. Which is wild.
That is deep. And I've been there. And I just don't want others to get to that point. And so, like you said, it's that check-in physically, but also that maybe side hustle or that hobby is a comparison, right? Like, you know how you feel when you're baking or when you're producing a podcast or whatever that could be. I had a couple people that I went to college with and we all ended up in oil and gas. And what I really admire about them is we were 22-year-olds, and within a year, one of the guys, he became a chef. And another young lady, she opened a dance school and eventually ended up in secondary education teaching dance. I think for me, I always had a draw towards corporate, right? Or not even corporate, towards business.
Yeah.
You know, but I've been very good about when I get to that point, if I don't feel valued, I'm going to move on. Like, I'll get clarity as a person of faith. I have to get to that point of clarity. And you said that earlier. You can't necessarily make the decision in the emotion. It's the logic, because you really have to figure out what is it here that is not settling well. Because I think that's the difference, right? Like for some people, it could be going into a completely different field. For some people, it could just simply be the environment. So I think you do, like you said, spend that time investing in yourself and then figuring out, is this an internal issue or an external issue?
Yeah, totally.
This conversation with Hiwote was so good. I love to see Black women walking in their power of choice within the workplace. Even though her journey led her away from corporate tech, it was on her terms. She made an empowered decision to examine her options, gain clarity on the motives driving them, and then made a bold move that would create the opportunities she truly desired and ultimately lead her to where she thrives. Honestly, so much of navigating your career in corporate tech is a lot like the song The Gambler. You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and you better know when to run. When I think of some of the challenging and even crappy situations you might be facing, like Hiwote's former director limiting her already much delayed promotion to force her into a career path she didn't want to be in, or finding out you're being paid less than your peers, or dealing with microaggressions in a toxic environment. I know it can be frustrating. Unfortunately, it's just part of the journey. These are all just signs guiding you to where you can actually thrive. Don't let it cause you to question you. Remember, you belong here, period. It's your decision as to how you'll craft your career, whether within one environment or by moving on to another, or simply choosing to step away completely and do something different. But before making any decisions, get clear on what it is you really need and want from any environment. Invest time in you. Invest time in reflecting on your values, boundaries, because only then can you take the next best step for you and make an empowered decision on where you'll choose to belong. As we wrapped up our conversation, I asked Hiwote to share any parting thoughts or resources for early career Black women that are currently questioning whether or not they belong in tech.
I think reading and learning about your zone of genius versus your zone of excellence is potentially a very helpful thing to do early on, because programming was in my zone of excellence. And your zone of excellence is all the stuff that you can do that other people praise you for, but actually drains you. And your zone of genius is the stuff that energizes you and you're very good at. I think if I paid attention to that earlier, I probably would have made pivots faster. So that's the only thing I would add. But I'm also just really excited that you're making this podcast, because I wish I had this resource when I was 25, 26, 27, because I really needed guidance and information from other people who were in a similar or further ahead position.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hiwote. Again, you can check out Hiwote at depthandcandor.com. And with that, we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Take some time to reflect on what you heard here. Be sure to follow us on IG and subscribe to our newsletter on Substack. Find us at Thriving in the Game on both. If you have a comment or recommendation, DM or email me. You can find my email in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you as we build community around thriving in the game. Until next time, take care.